So, I have neglected my responsibilities as a YouTuber with a username that starts with Godzilla. In a sense, I have been a pretty big piece of shit. I know I haven't included a Godzilla figure in a lot of my videos very recently, at least as far as the last half a dozen or so uploads are concerned, but we had to buy a new guinea pig cage, and it just bothered me that the total for the Amazon order wasn't like a round number.
That seemed a nice round number.
Luke, that's money you're talking about. What's the matter with you?
And I saw this Hedorah figure recommended to me for like 20 bucks, and it rounded up the order total to like a multiple of 100, so I was just like, oh, I might as well. And then when it came, my girlfriend was like, what's this? This is the Final Wars Hedorah for anyone keeping score at home. It's obviously not a very pricey or like highbrow figure, but I don't have any Hedorah figures, so I just figured what the hell, I might as well get it. And to anyone wondering what this thing around my neck is, we got it on clearance at Walmart like a week or two ago. It's like a neck piece that I definitely had on correctly and wasn't on backwards, but it's like an air conditioning collar. I just turned it on, but it wasn't loud enough, so the auto editor's not even gonna pick it up. But anyway, I said I was gonna make a video about Godzilla, right? What exactly am I making a shedding tears video on pertaining to Godzilla subjects that is not one of the many tiers that I have made before? You know, ranking the movies, ranking the monsters, ranking the humans of all things. A couple of my friends kind of gave me a hard time about that. They were like, why of all things would you make a tier list video about the human characters in Godzilla? And I'm sure if I told them, they'd probably say the same thing about this concept. Now, if you're too young, you may not be old enough to remember a more civilized age.
But a more civilized age.
Where physical media was common. Now, if you've been a diligent subscriber of mine and are one of the 12 people that YouTube currently tells me has watched that video, you have watched my Godzilla story, An Ode to Don Vincenzo, and you know as a consequence that my godfather used to routinely stop and get Godzilla DVDs at like a convenience store and bring them to me, and think pretty much all of them, with like the exception of Destroy All Monsters and Godzilla's Revenge, were of the Sony line of DVDs. Most of them had 50th anniversary on them, and anyone who has watched that old reaction video that I did knows that Sony had quite a number of the Godzilla titles under their banner.
The original Godzilla series.
And I watched this compilation trailer in a reaction video that is probably a little bit out of date, especially considering my understanding of the technology of OBS Studio has kind of changed over time. But there is a part of the Sony Godzilla VHS, DVD, Blu-ray lines that most people have probably forgotten about. It's kind of obscured on the picture of Final Wars' cover and Godzilla vs. Destroy's cover here, but look down here at the southern portion of the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974 DVD cover. It says Mechanical Titan of Terror. Anyone cerebral enough probably knows where this is going. I'm going to make a tier list where I go over all of the various taglines for Sony's DVDs, VHS tapes, and Blu-ray collections. I will be ranking them on this scale. S tier is exciting. These are cool ones that if I had never seen the movie before, I would probably get hyped up by seeing the movie advertised in this way. Cool is that, but less, you know, it's cool. Mediocre is kind of like, yeah, I guess that's a description you could make of the movie, I guess. Awkward is they are bad, but not like atrocious. It's just like, why would you take interest in the movie because of these taglines specifically? And bad is bad. I don't think they adequately describe the movie. I do not think that even if they're misleading, they're like hype-inducing, so they're just bad. Kind of related to that, I will say, as a diehard Godzilla fan that has watched every single one of the movies in this tier list, I'm going to try my best not to let the actual movies themselves themselves change my perspective on how cool or good the tagline is. I also don't want to really factor in the quality of the VHS, DVD, or Blu-ray releases of these movies. Like I said, just the tagline. Is the tagline cool? Did this tier list already, so I have a kind of reference tier list image to go off of for this recording, but there may be some impromptu changes. I do not know. Okay, we're gonna go through each tier and plop one in just to kind of start off the list with some kind of understanding of what's going to go where. As I have said before, I have a sort of soft spot for the Godzilla movie, and part of the reason for that is that the tagline and the kind of advertising for it was kind of hype. Maybe it was just because I was young when I got the DVD for it, but Get Ready to Crumble is, I think, the king of this tier list. I mean, just say it to yourself. Get ready to crumble! It's the GOAT. Next up for cool, this one's good, and ironically, it's not cool if you know the context of the film. I think It's a Major Monster Meltdown is really cool, and a lot of that is probably due to the alliteration in the phrase, It's a Major Monster Meltdown. I have also said in the past that I still have my VHS tape for this movie. I mean, without really giving it away, it's telling you the major focus of the plot, yes? Godzilla is having a meltdown. He's overheated. He's dying. And I just feel like Major Monster Meltdown is just a really catchy and memorable way to kind of put that out there. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla's tagline is Battle of the Century. Or, I'm sorry, let me say it clearly with better enunciation. The Battle of the Century. This one is in mediocre because what exactly is hype or original or creative about this tagline? Many of the Sony DVDs kind of suffer from this, where it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess, in a manner of speaking, it is a rather momentous battle, but Battle of the Century does not tell me anything that I need to know. Similarly, Tokyo SOS's tagline DVD phrase is Terror Comes in Threes. I put this one in awkward because while it's a decent tagline, completely out of context, this is an instance where my knowledge of the film itself is kind of making me go, is that really an accurate tagline? Because Kiryu, Mechagodzilla, for anyone who obviously has not seen the movie and is not a diehard Godzilla fan, is not an antagonistic force or bad actor in the movie in any way, so saying terror comes in threes really only works if you don't know the movie that well. I think Get Ready to Crumble and It's a Major Monster Meltdown and even Battle of the Century make at least passing sense, even if you don't know the plot of the movie or its quality. And bad tier, this is a case where the quality of the movie coincidentally lines up with the quality of the tagline on the physical media. Godzilla vs. Megaguirus does not have a tagline on the front cover of the box, but on the back side of the box, you know, where the kind of plot summary description on the back is, it says, quote, "Can Godzilla defeat the evil Megaguirus?" And before I even constructed the tier list on my computer as preparation for making this video, I was like, yeah, that one's going to the bottom. That one's crap. That one's bad. Who thought that that was a good idea? I have more to say on this tagline, believe it or not, but we'll come to that when we get to it. So stick around through the rest of the video to find out where that comment is leading. Okay, so we have all of the baselines for each of the tiers laid out. Give me a second. We're going to do these relatively in order. You can't see it, but I'm rearranging the icons so I can just do it in order. I do not know if I'm going to have this tier list linked in the description. Show this video some love and, you know, comment below telling me if you want to have access to this tier list. Because right now I'm making a single-use tier list, but if people want access to all the images, I can do that. Okay, I think I have everything in order. Alright, so first off, I have the 1966 film Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. The tagline for this one is similarly to Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, only on the back of the DVD box. And this one is Godzilla fights in a war against terror. And it's like, okay. I mean, the movie's not like anything special, but I feel like there's a more interesting tagline that you could have done with this particular film, but I personally cannot think of one myself. For that reason, I think I'm gonna plop it in mediocre behind Battle of the the century. It's just slightly more wordy.
And that one was too wordy. That was flawed from the ground up. It wasn't funny.
While simultaneously not really telling you anything about the plot of the movie, aside from the kind of vague connection to the existence of the Red Bamboo rogue military organization. I mean, I guess there's like fighter jets kind of around this tagline on the back of the box, but it just doesn't really move the needle. If I saw that, I wouldn't be like, ooh, I really gotta buy that. I would just be like, okay, lame, whatever. Moving on. The next Showa film that Sony had a DVD for also only has the tagline on the back of the DVD, but I honestly kind of find it lamer than Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, and that's Japan's greatest foe delivers an heir for Son of Godzilla 1967. Slight sidebar here, this is the only DVD of mine that is kind of like in a damaged case, because like the little circle thing that like holds the DVD in is like busted, so I have to be very careful whenever I get the DVD out to watch this one, but that has nothing to do with the tagline. Feel like this tagline is trying to evoke a sort of Son of Frankenstein cheesy B-movie kind of feel. It does not really communicate Godzilla's strength or terror in the same way that Godzilla vs. the Sea Monsters tagline does. Also, during the Showa series, the last thing I would describe Godzilla as is, quote, Japan's greatest foe. I understand why they use that phrase, because to most normal people who are not hardcore Godzilla fans, they're not going to know that about the Showa series, but it just doesn't really land for me as a result of that. Now, you may think, oh, okay, Henry, you're just going to be ranking all of the Showa taglines as mediocre. No, actually, I'm not. Most of the Showa movies are mediocre, but even the mediocre movies can have decent taglines. I said in my Shedding Tears tier list of all the different Godzilla movies that I have a sort of soft spot for this particular Showa movie. Personally, I think Our Environment is Doomed.
Doomed!
I actually kind of like that tagline. Maybe it's just kind of the combination of the art on the Godzilla vs. Hedorah DVD box with the kind of bold attitude of the verbiage used in that tagline. Like, it's not saying Godzilla is going to destroy the environment or anything. It's literally amping up the enemy of Godzilla in the movie, saying Hedorah is going to doom our environment and Godzilla is fighting against that. And I don't know, I just really like the cool, like, arm up in the air Shingeki Godzilla pose that he strikes on the DVD cover for this film. Greta Thunberg, if you want to make people take your movement more seriously, this is the kind of thing you need. Godzilla. This next one is, I don't know, I feel like people are going to disagree with me on the coolness of this particular tagline. Godzilla vs. Gigan's tagline is no one is safe. And I'm gonna say it, I'm actually kind of hyped by this tagline. Much like with Godzilla vs. Hedorah, my gut wants to tell me that the combination of the artwork slash... Oh my gosh. Oh, Chick-fil-A sent me a notification in the middle of recording this. I am unreasonably angered by this. Anyway, it's just very matter-of-fact, it's punchy, it's to the point, and the Shingeki suit on the kind of lime green background, I don't know, it just kind of gets me amped up. I really like this. No one is safe. And then this next one is pretty good, but I wouldn't say it cracks into that level of coolness and hype. I think Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974's tagline of Mechanical Titan of Terror is better than Our Environment is Doomed, but it's not as good as It's a Major Monster Meltdown from Godzilla vs. Destroya. It is more alliterative than Godzilla vs. Hedorah's tagline is, but it's not as alliterative as Major Monster Meltdown from Destroya. I feel like there are two different ways to make a good tagline for these sorts of things, and it's either blunt force trauma, hit 'em hard, hit 'em fast, you know, get ready to crumble, or no one is safe, or you to employ alliteration, which is kind of a good mnemonic device to help you remember. You know, it kind of sticks it in your brain. Also, the artwork on the cover kind of pairs well with this tagline because you can see the mechanical titan of terror, and the Showa Mechagodzilla is a classic Godzilla monster enemy design. So I feel like I'm justified in placing this tagline in cool. Okay, I think I'm going to defer from my preliminary test here for this next one. The tagline for Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah in 1991 is Godzilla is back. This time it's for good, which is kind of a pun because if you know anything about the plot of Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, you know that time travel is a major part of the plot. Originally, I had it ranked ahead of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974, Mechanical Titan of Terror, but thinking about it now, alliteration is one thing, but I think the sort of pseudo pun in this tagline kind of demotes it a little bit. It's more memorable than the Battle of the Century from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, so I won't dock it that far, but it neither inspires tremendous hype, nor is it particularly cool on account of the pun. I will say that the concept that Godzilla is back for good, like Godzilla is not going anywhere anytime soon, is a fair enough point of beneficiality to it. Now, this next one, where do I move it to? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna move this one too. Originally, I had Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth, underneath Battle of the Century from Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, but let me make a case here. This same tagline is done infinitely better in Get Ready to Rumble. Get Ready to Rumble is more of a WWE professional wrestling kind of thing, which may have made sense for a more Showa-style movie, but for Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth, I just feel like you could have probably come up with something more interesting. Maybe Batra's in the Belfry, or something to that effect. I think maybe it's just the fact that it is a Godzilla vs. Mothra movie that kind of precludes this movie from having a more hype tagline. But I think Godzilla Tokyo SOS, Terror Comes in Threes, is more interesting overall, more unique. I just think that the fact that Mechagodzilla is not an antagonist in that movie docked it from being mediocre, whereas Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth, Get Ready to Rumble is just kind of generic. Like, I feel like the presence of Batra in this movie could be used to a greater effect in not only the cover art and the box art layout, but also the tagline. I'm also not going to check, even though I have all of my DVDs back on that shelf back there, but I don't even remember if the box recognizes Batra's presence in the film, aside from, you know, the copyright symbol. Next up, we have Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla II, and I'm just gonna plop this one behind Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth. The tagline for vs. Mechagodzilla II is, quote, the mother of all Godzilla adventures. First off, I don't really see this movie as much of an adventure, but also this is clearly a pun referring to the presence of baby Godzilla in the movie, and I believe the back of the box refers to the struggle between Godzilla, Rodan, and Mechagodzilla as the custody battle of the ages or something like that. Not only is this one a pun, much like the Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah one of Godzilla's back, this time it's for good, but also Godzilla is male in the Heisei series. I mean, I know he's kind of fighting over custody of baby Godzilla, and women tend to win custody battles in court more often than men do, but Godzilla is a father figure. Also, at the same time, this tagline says, quote, Godzilla adventures, end quote. So it's not even really framing it as a battle for supremacy, whereas Godzilla and Mothra, the Battle for Earth, Get Ready to Rumble, at least frames it as a sort of fight for dominance in some way. So for that reason, I consider Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 to be rather lame. Next up, we have Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, which has the tagline, a supernatural, super-powered, intergalactic epic. If it were based around where the movie's quality lies, I feel like it would be down there in awkward, because that's not really a fitting tagline for the movie. As I've said in the past, I don't really like Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla as a movie. Space Godzilla is cool, but the movie not so much. I will say though, it's better than both of the the mediocre Showa movie taglines for versus the Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla, it's almost kind of bodacious. You almost kind of respect the Sony marketing team for having the gonads to give Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla of all movies a grandiose, jaw-dropping tagline. Also, supernatural, superpowered is kinda cool. It doesn't really stick the landing hardcore, but it's not terrible. Next up, we have GMK. Again, I am diverging from my kind of preliminary tier list here. First off, Who Will Be the Last to Survive is only on the back cover of the DVD, so it's not even front and center. But also, Godzilla doesn't even survive this movie, and none of the Guardian monsters survive the movie. The only people who survive are the human characters, so that's kind of an awkward way to advertise the movie. I also think Who Will Be the Last to Survive is just kind of generic. Like, okay, and then the last DVD tagline that we are going to go over is Godzilla Final Wars, and the tagline for Godzilla Final Wars is Earth, outnumbered, outmonstered, outdone. I think that one is one of the best. I think it kind of oversells some of the parts of Godzilla Final Wars, but it does draw attention to the concept of being outmonstered, and as I said a long time ago, I think the best parts of Godzilla Final Wars are the monster parts, and I would watch those like a million times. So I really like this one. I also like the cover and how just above the tagline you see Ozaki kind of doing the superhero landing pose underneath Godzilla, and I don't know, something about it just makes it really cool in terms of visual framing. That was kind of a pretentious way of saying I liked it, but okay. And finally, I have 3 taglines for movies that we have already ranked. I did not do this for every single one of the bad or mediocre taglines for these films, but I kind of, in the process of making the icons for this tier list, thought of some better taglines for a couple of the mediocre and south movies. So let me know in the comments what you kind of think of these taglines. I'm not gonna just rank them all in exciting tier. I did my best, but I think paired with the movies that they're for, you can only do so much better. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is currently the lowest ranked tagline on this tier list and is by far the worst as far as I'm concerned. Can Godzilla defeat the evil Mechagodzilla? It's like, did you just like show up to work and like fall asleep before you could make a tagline, and your boss was like, hey, what's the tagline for this one? And you were like, can Godzilla defeat the evil Mechagodzilla? I do not believe that this would be a monumentally better tagline, but the one I came up with for Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is a supercharged sci-fi stinger, which is, yes, a bit of a pun, but I also tried to make it alliterative. Supercharged sci-fi stinger. As you can probably tell, I was kind of trying to evoke a similar vibe as the Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla tagline. I don't think it's as good as the proper Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla tagline, but I do think that it's better than the Showa ones, which are kind of generic and not really appropriate. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla has the Dimension Tide, which brings Mechagodzilla into the present, and as a result, I feel like the adjective sci-fi is sort of appropriate because Mechagodzilla comes through a wormhole, and the use of the word stinger, I use that because obviously Mechagodzilla has a stinger, and a stinger can be construed as, you know, something that hooks you, something that excites you, which would technically be very, very, very misleading, but I feel like that's kind of the purpose of such a tagline on a Godzilla DVD as produced by Sony. As I said earlier, I think the Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah tagline is kind of lackluster. I think the one that I have kind of improves on it a little bit. I do not think that this tagline spoils the movie too much, but the one I came up with was, quote, a rampage from beyond the grave, which sort of spoils that Godzilla in this one is in some way related to the spirits of the dead that Japan took in the Pacific Theater prior to the attack on Pearl Harbor and America's subsequent involvement in the Pacific Theater. But to someone who doesn't know anything about the movie, this could also be construed as sort of tipping them off to the Guardian monster monsters, you know, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Baragon. I also think Rampage Beyond the Grave, it's not alliterative, but it sort of kind of rhymes. So I think it hits with a little bit more potency than Who Will Be the Last to Survive. If I ranked it too high and that one is rather cringe, let me know in the comments. Okay, apparently in my test tier that I saved to my computer, I did not have this last one. This last one is, again, also a custom tagline that I kind of came up for this video to kind of show as a proof of concept that better taglines for these movies could be made in certain circumstances and cases. Wait, never mind, I did actually rank it. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla's tagline of Battle of the Century was rather mid, so I was like, what could you do to make it more interesting? And I tried to kind of get into the mindset of a Sony marketing person. I don't think it's better than the ones that are going to be above it, but I think the one I came up with is better than Godzilla vs. Gigan. The tagline I came up with for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla was Atomic Fire faces Cold Steel. I was kind of inspired by the tagline from the tier directly below it, Mechanical Titan of Terror, and I was like, well, bullets and gunfire are usually described as cold steel, and Kiryu is a weapon of, you know, the human forces, obviously against Godzilla, so you need to kind of evoke a similar kind of versus feeling out of the tagline. But you also want to contrast the very organic Godzilla with the mechanical Kiryu without name dropping either of them directly, right? So I thought, well, what could you contrast with a robot? And I thought, well, okay, it's cold steel, it's a lifeless machine. And I went, well, what's the opposite of cold? Warm, hot. What could I use to contrast cold? Well, Godzilla has atomic breath, which is frequently referred to as atomic fire. So atomic fire is hot, so that stands in contrast against cold steel. So atomic fire faces cold steel. I think that would be an improvement. Well, let me know what you think of that. I just think that would be a cooler tagline for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, which, as I said, had a rather generic tagline on the DVD. I did not make any other taglines for any of the other movies in mediocre and awkward and bad. So let me know in the comments section kind of what you would do if you were to make DVD, VHS, Blu-ray taglines for those movies in the style of these taglines. And like I said, if there is enough clamor for it, I can make this tier list public. But yeah, that was just a random weird thing that I don't think gets really talked about a whole lot among Godzilla fans. As I mentioned, my godfather buying me all these DVDs and VHS tapes kind of helped shape my youth, and when I was young, I was exposed to all these various taglines, and many of them stuck in my memory for that reason. Like, that DVD compilation trailer may have one or two good lines that stick with me to this day, but the actual DVD taglines have the same kind of staying power. Whenever I think of Final Wars, if you were to ask me to summarize it in a single sentence, I would say Earth, outnumbered, outmonstered, outdone. If you were to ask me to summarize Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 1974, I would say Mechanical Titan of Terror. I'm kind of sad that the kind of rights nightmare of the physical releases of all the different Godzilla movies precludes us from having DVDs for many of the other movies kind of in the same vein. And to that point, I think, of a dying breed of consumer that really likes having physical DVDs and CDs and what have you of the things that I love. And so you can find all of these different covers and the ensuing taglines on that shelf that I have with all of the movies. But in this era of digital dominance, you can't really find it anymore, at least not to my knowledge. So kind of let me know what your thoughts are on all of those different things. Thanks for watching, guys. I know it's been a minute since I did a Godzilla video, so I apologize for that. I'm going to try to amp up the recordings of Godzilla videos, because I know I started out this channel with Godzilla Save the Earth Melee specific content, and I'm sure I'm doing those videos continually as new information comes out, but I kind of want to populate my schedule way in advance, because I want people to have something consistent to watch from me. And as anyone who has watched particular videos videos of my nose. I don't know exactly how long I'm going to be able to do that, so, you know, what can you do? Leave a like, leave a comment, drop a subscribe so that I can be pleased to know that this content is something that people want to see more of. And until next time, guys, you take it easy. I'll catch you on the flip side.